Hello and welcome to today's demo, Real-Time Network Visibility, Intelligence, and Enforcement. I'm Ashley Jarash, Senior Marketing Programs Manager at Great Bay Software. Before we get started, I want to let you know that at the end of the demo, we're going to take your questions. You can submit your questions throughout the presentation under the Questions dropdown in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll be sure to address them at the end. Also, today we'll be giving away a Google Home. One lucky winner will be chosen at the end of the webinar, so be sure to stay on all the way through the end after our questions. Before we begin our presentation, I'd like to introduce our featured speakers. We have David Barnes, Cybersecurity Senior Manager with us from Crow-Horwath. David provides technology consulting services to clients and technology providers. Working with his clients, he understands the business requirements of the request and designs appropriate solutions. David has more than 25 years of experience servicing clients in all phases of technology engagements. We also have Adam Beckman, Solutions Engineer at Great Bay Software. Adam provides technical and consultative discussions around network visibility, intelligence, and enforcement. He has more than 12 years of experience in all phases of IT support and administration in a variety of verticals, and also has personal designations within the industry. I would now like to turn over the presentation to David Barnes. David, take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. As Ashley mentioned, I'm with Crow-Horwath, where I'm a senior manager. I'd just like to speak briefly about some of the value propositions that Crow can provide to our different clients, beginning with helping them with governance risk and compliance programs, or GRC programs, performing risk and security audits, pen testing, understanding data privacy and confidentiality requirements, including GDPR needs, and developing security architectures. Those are all basis for providing a good security, strong security posture within a company. As you're working through these, you may have come to learn that not all things fit all companies, and not all companies are capable of doing everything for themselves, whether it's experience or time and effort involved. In working with our customers and developing these programs, we've also developed relationships with key vendors and partners to help foster better and easier processes for our clients. In these cases where one size does not fit all, an organization approach to risk, if you're a small company versus a big company, or a local regional company versus international company, your appetite for risk will always be different. One of the main basic principles of having a good security posture and part of Security 101 is having a good understanding of what all devices are on your network, and doing so without a big impact on your personnel or your infrastructure. And this just happens to be one of the reasons why we have a strategic relationship with Great Bay Software. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Adam to help provide some more information on what Great Bay Software is and what they can offer. Adam?
All right, thank you, David. So one thing is very clear. That is that the amount of connected devices are definitely trending upwards. Gartner themselves has predicted that by 2020, there'll be over 20 billion of these connected things in the industry. Now, this makes sense due to the operational efficiencies recognized by these connected things. And obviously, anytime there's an increase in efficiency, there's a direct correlation to profit. Now, this increase of connected devices, these connected things, does warrant a change in current approaches to a lot of security practices. And visibility is no different. Visibility, is the first step in any good security practice, as even mentioned by the CIS top 20 controls, that the inventory and control of hardware assets should be your first stop when considering a good security practice. So there's a reason that visibility should be your first priority, but visibility also gives many benefits. Obviously, the one that comes to most people's mind is that it gives you a good basis to detect and inventory devices that are on your network, being able to see in real time what's connected, what's disconnected, where it's at location-wise on your network, and understanding what it is, an identity associated with that device is very important. But a good visibility also lends itself very well to being able to detect anomalies. So if you have the ability to determine what's on your network and what it is, and monitor its behavior, it makes very good sense that you should be able to alert given any anomaly or deviance in behavior from any of these devices. And of course, we mentioned operational efficiency, but that shouldn't be understated. A good visibility in an unmanaged device kind of centric perspective means agentless. It means reduced complexity and overhead due to the agentless approach. It means the elimination of whitelists and managing devices device by device due to a more broader viewpoint. It also means that with the removal of agents comes a reduction in complexity and not having to worry so much about compatibility issues with deployments and rolling out of agents. So let's look for a second at what a good visibility solution should have. There's three pillars that I like to picture when we look at visibility, and that is first the one that makes the most sense, and that is, or comes to most people's mind, and that is the visibility itself, right? So if you're watching on a network or a system and you want to know what's connected to it, it should be fairly complete. You should have a good understanding of not only a breadth of what is on your network, but a deeper view as well. So having a wealth of knowledge to pull from when identifying devices is important. And at Great Bay, we call those profiles. They go by a lot of things in the industry. Profiles is a fairly common term. Being able to identify a device, fit it into a profile, and where there's no profile or a profile doesn't make sense, to be able to build a customized profile to meet those device parameters. And then lastly, of course, there's integration perspective. So being able to integrate with other solutions and lend your visibility to strengthen other security controls that are in place. Telling other solutions what's on the network and when they connect is very important, as well as being able to suck in information from those other solutions to improve your knowledge of what is on the network. Flexibility is also very important. Being able to have a flexible enough approach to deploy into multiple environments. No two environments are the same. There's different infrastructures out there. There's different vendors, from Cisco deployments to an Aruba or another switch or NID infrastructure. Being able to fit into any of those is important, wireless versus wired, and then the ability to always be up. So as a visibility solution serving the foundation of your security practice, oftentimes a solution like that gets referred to as like a tier 0 solution, where its uptime is very critical, because if it goes down, it really has a drastic impact on other solutions and your ability to maintain your security level. So being able to have something like high availability or disaster recovery for minimal downtime is important. And then lastly, we touched on ease of use, but again, that shouldn't be understated. So ease of use from not only an agentless approach, which has its own wealth of operational efficiency enhancements there, but being able to access the information you want very easily. That means when you first get into the solution, you should be able to see a dashboard that has exactly what you want on it, so that there's not a lot of moving around to get the information that's valuable to you. It means being able to easily integrate with other solutions. It means being able to output your information to other centralized solutions like a SIM, to be able to send real-time events and anomaly detection behaviors to a SIM so that it can make more informed decisions and notify the appropriate personnel should something happen. And then lastly, being able to update, right? There's always new devices coming out on the market, and being able to update your knowledge of what is out there and disseminate that across the install base is very critical as well. So with that, I'd like to jump into a quick product demonstration. So let me be for those that haven't seen it before, let me be the first to introduce you and welcome you to the Great Bay Network Intelligence Platform. This is the dashboard that you see when you first log in. And there's two things I really like about this dashboard. The first of which, and I mentioned this, I kind of alluded to this earlier, is the ability to customize and get the information you want when you first log in. So right now I'm logged in as an analyst. I named my account analyst. I can name it whatever I want, but it's more of an analyst persona. So as I'm in, I'm seeing things like the events in real time. I can see authentication attempts and what's authenticated and not authenticated on the network at any given point. I can drill in and get information on events that are happening, and then I can also view kind of my asset inventory, both recent and long-term devices on the network. So there's for other personas, not everyone's going to want to see the same thing. So an admin, for example, may not care about real-time events. Maybe they care more about total assets on the network and status of the actual solution itself, so a health check, if you will. Maybe they care about knowing what's falling off the network. So different views can be had for different personas. Now, everyone, there's many people out there that have kind of a hybrid role where maybe they do a little bit of analyst or maybe a little bit of admin, or maybe they want to see some of what the analyst sees. So these dashboards can be customized. I'm able to, for example, if I wanted to see real-time events, I can add the graph of real-time events back in. I can, change where it's displayed. I can move it around if I want it down here or over here. And then let's assume that I don't want retired endpoints and I don't want Mac vendors, so we'll delete those as well. And then I'll save my dash. And now this will stick with this account login anytime they relog. So it is user-based, not role-based. So different admins can have different views as well. Also, one of the pillars that we mentioned is that visibility and that broad and deep understanding of what's on your network. So this color wheel here to the left, this is kind of a graphical representation of what's on my network. It's in a descending order. So for example, these security cameras, I've got 10,000 spread across my network. And as I move down through this list, that number goes down. And I can browse through the network because everything is interactable. And that brings to the next thing I really like about this interface, and that is that everything is interactive. So every chart, every word, everything is for the most part linkable. For example, iOS 11, I can drill into this and I can see it takes me to the view of what all my iOS 11 devices are. Now this is one step down, so I'm kind of getting to that deeper aspect of what's on the network. And so this list of 13 devices, I can see very quickly the IP addresses, the locations, and whether or not they leverage authentication, and then the last time we saw activity from them. Now the location is important. The location is something that you don't get with every visibility solution. It just depends on how they deploy and how they go about collecting data on the network. But from location, what we deem as location is down to the port and switch identity, or to if it's wireless, the access point that it is on. So being able to tell you exactly where on the network a device resides can be fairly critical. I can dive in another step deeper. So again, now I'm on this one specific device, and if I go down into here, I can actually see all the data that we've collected about this device. So we can see this kind of ties into how we're collecting and leveraging the network infrastructure to tell us what's on the network, whether it's things like a DHCP handshake that we've observed, to things like flow data from what ports it's talking over, what devices it's talking to, etc. But there's a wealth of data points we can pull from the network, not all of which are represented with this iOS 11 device. So I mentioned location information. So let me also show you that, something you may have already thought about, but if we have location information, well, should we be able to draw a network map? And the answer is yes. So I'm looking here at my lab, and I'm going to jump into our Minneapolis location, and I can now see what switches I have on the network and how they're interconnected. I can jump in a step deeper and see exactly what's connected on this switch. So there's a couple of views here that I can leverage with the network topology at this level. One is, as we see now, is by profile. So I can see, for example, I've got a D-Link device connected here. I've got a couple of VMs running. I've got a Windows 2008 server, and then of course I've got an infusion pump and some other devices as well. I can also view if this is a segmented network, and I want to see how stuff is separated on the switch, I can view by VLAN. So if I had multiple VLANs on the switch, I can see what devices reside in what VLAN. If you're doing part of the segmentation, that can be very important and useful information as well. Now, any part of network visibility and control, all right, we've talked a little bit about the control, but let's look at we talked a bit about visibility, let's look at the control side of that equation. So I'm going to go into a tabular view of what's on my network rather than a topology view, and I'm going to jump into one of my switches and come down here to port 39. I actually have a device, it's the D-Link device. You saw it on the topology map. What you also may have not realized, but on that first view of the analyst, you noticed that there was some red on the authentication report. I could drill in, you get to hear it through the authentication report as well, but Either way, it's going to take me to this D-Link device that is trying to authenticate on the network, but is unable to at this time. And that is because we're leveraging authentication here, and this is not an authorized device. So not only is it not being able to authenticate, but I'm also can see it on my dash, and it's generating events and telling me, hey, this device is trying to authenticate, but it's not allowed. So let's assume that for a second that we did want it on the device, or we did want it on the network, and we wanted to authenticate it. So there's multiple ways we can handle onboarding. Well, I'm going to show you the manual way, but there are some more automated processes as well. So in this instance, let's pretend that we've got someone who's installed this camera, and they've connected to the network. They've called the help desk, said, hey, Bob from IT, I've disconnected this, and I need you to allow it on the network so I can further configure it and get it set up for my customer. So Bob would find it through the interface. He'd come to this page, and he would sponsor the device. Now, what sponsorship does is it's going to force it, or it's going to give it temporary access to the network. Now, when you sponsor a device, there's lots of ways that you can dictate that sponsorship. You can tell it specifically what VLAN to be on, or you can give it, and you can also or give it a timeout. So you can say, like I did here, 24-hour access. And the idea is that we dictate its access regardless of what other profile it's in at the time. We move it to this access level on whatever VLAN we want it on, and then it's able to start talking and starts doing stuff on the network. And as we observe it, it will migrate out of that sponsorship role to a more permanent role based on how we've defined our access requirements. So if I refresh the page, we should see it move into sponsorship. Bear with me here. I'm coughing a bit. I've been sick the last couple of days. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is sometimes we can force this by going back and doing a hard reset of the switch, which is actually another feature that we can do within Great Bay. Is you see this up and down over here to the left. We can actually bring a port down, which is kind of useful. It prevents you from having to jump into a network switch to toggle things. You can do it right here from the interface. And we do that through a number of ways. We can do that through SNMP requests. We can also do it through COA requests as well. Let's do a refresh here. Jump down, and we're still at D-Link. Needless to say, typically this would come up, and you would see it as a different type of device. Maybe sponsorship, and then from sponsorship it would move into the actual D-Link camera that it actually is. I think it's a 933L security camera. So once you have that, you'd have your set access, and then the next step is looking at your the ability to suck in additional data. So if I jump out here, we have a thing called a data connector, and what a data connector is really slick. A data connector is one way to pull in information to the solution to add additional color to a device. Now, there's two ways to do that. The other way is through an API, which is a more robust two-way exchange. What I love about the data connector is it's very quick and very easy to do. You don't have to be a programmer or a coder or contacts any tech support to get it working. There's a couple lines you have to configure. You have a CSV file, and as long as the solution can export a CSV file, it can be sucked into the Great Bay Network Intelligence platform. And so what that looks like is essentially a solution such as, for example, here I'm going to pretend like we're an asset inventory database. It's going to export in CSV information to a shared network folder, of which our solution is constantly monitoring. And so the moment I do an upload of this demo file, which again is just a CSV file of some data fields, it should suck into our solution here and should populate our asset tags. And so we've got additional information here now. We've got the owner, which is the security lab, the asset tag itself, and we've got a serial number of the device. This is all stuff that, again, being an agentless solution, you can't always pull things directly from the device, but if it exists somewhere else, whether it's in an existing solution or in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere, you can very easily import it into the solution. And then once you have it, you can actually drive decisions off of that as if it was another data point. So it looks like now the sponsorship is kicked in. So it took a couple minutes, but we've moved to the sponsorship role. This sponsorship does allow it access. So you see up here our status is turned to having temporary access to the network. And then once it's on, it actually is now graduated a step further as the device starts talking and doing stuff on the network and behaving like a security camera. It has moved from the sponsorship role out to the D-Link network camera role. And now once the sponsorship falls away in 24 hours, it will remain within this D-Link camera profile and have the access that we've determined or labeled within that profile. So one of the things we mentioned earlier was events. And so this where something will transition from one profile to another can drive an event. But let's look at the security side of the eventing and just to kind of fully fledge that out. So one thing that we mentioned earlier is the ability to watch for anomalous behavior, right? Do some level of device monitoring. And so being able, having all the points on the network that we're monitoring, we are able to see if a device's behavior changes, if it starts operating in a way that we didn't expect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick Mac spoof to emulate this network camera, but I'm going to pretend like, or I'm going to do this from a Windows XP box. And so by assuming the MAC address of the network camera, this Windows box should start being, should get access to the network and do things that it shouldn't be able to do. So I jump back here and do a refresh. We should see that it's jumped to Windows, which, that should never happen. You should never have a security camera start behaving like a Windows device. So if I view my events, we should see that we have a security event that's been triggered. Now, events can do a number of things. Obviously, the alerting is the primary role, right? So an event can be generated and sent to the interface, to the dash, or to a third party like a SIM or an email, depending on how you want to be notified of this. But as you see here, we've got this profile change that has occurred. It's a potential MAC spoof, and it tells me the device MAC, the time, and then the shift in profile. So it went from being a D-Link security camera to a Windows device. And it even tells me the lab switch that it's located on where the device resides. And so the event can, in addition to alerts, it can actually take action. So an event can also dictate the access the device should have. So an event can do things like isolate the device. So if we see a MAC spoof or shift in identity that shouldn't happen, we can isolate or we can completely kick it off the network altogether. And it's a very flexible approach because you don't have to configure one type of enforcement for all devices. You can determine the reaction based on location, based on profile shift, based on a number of factors. So lastly, let me show you a little bit about the reporting that we have. So there's some stock reports available within our interface, number that come with the appliance. A fully qualified domain is one of my favorites. It shows you if you're on an enterprise network, you can see things like domains that are devices belong to that aren't your main domain, and that may be an indicator of something that shouldn't be there, and you can track down, or it's good to be aware of. But we also have the ability to do custom reports. So I showed you our iOS devices already, but let's assume that, for example, I wanted to do a report every week on what Apple devices are on the network or what iOS devices are on the network. So I can go through and create a device search with the parameters that make sense to custom tailor it to my search, and then schedule that to run on an interval. And then once it runs, not only will it run, but it can generate a PDF and then save that off or send it to me for information. This report is, if I view it within our interface, it is linkable, just like the dashboard. So every single thing here allows me to drill in. And I can also choose my columns. So if there's additional columns I want to see, I can add them here as well. So I hope that was a good view for those that haven't seen our solution before, and those that have. I hope you learned something new.
Great, thank you, Adam. At this time, I'd like to remind you that we'll be getting to our Q&A portion of the presentation. You can still submit your questions under the questions dropdown. And before I get to that, I want to call out that we have some great resources available to you today in the handouts section. Specifically, I'd recommend checking out our product overview. Again, you're going to have that deeper dive into the technical questions that you may have about how to get visibility into your network. There's also some great case studies listed for you to check out and a good press release that was just published this quarter. So now I'm going to take a look and see what questions we have submitted. Go ahead and keep putting your questions, and once we're done with questions, we'll announce our Google Home winner. We did have one that popped into the presentation a little bit ago, and that question is, we perform periodic network scans to discover and track devices on our network. What advantages does Great Bay Software have? Adam, this seems kind of a question for you.
Yeah, glad to, Ashley. Thank you. Very oftentimes when we're in conversations with customers, they're currently running some type of vulnerability scanner. And it doesn't have to be a vulnerability scanner. It could be any type of active scan solution, whether it's just a simple Nmap or ping sweep of the network. And what we often find is that there's limitations to those types of discovery methods. Some of the limitations obviously are that it is point in time, so any transient device may not be captured. Devices that come on and off the network, there's a chance that they're not there when you get scanned. But then there's a lot of things that people don't realize with those active scans, and that is that depending on how those solutions are deployed, there's a lot of things that can prevent a device from being discovered. There's things such as routing issues. So if a device doesn't have the correct gateway to get back, if it's on an adjacent network, it won't be discovered. Firewalls, whether it's at the device level or on the network, can block scans. And then the other thing we find is scanning these connected things, right? So non-traditional unmanaged devices. It's very hard to fingerprint and know exactly what they are, because you're really looking at a limited subset of data for identifying the device. And that's where something like Great Bay, where our solution differs in that we don't, we're agentless and we don't talk to the devices themselves. Instead, we integrate with the network fabric. So as the device comes on the network, we can see that at the switch level, right? Device comes on, or an access point level. That generates an event, a trap that gets sent to our solution that says, hey, this new device came on. Then that allows us to take real-time action to learn more about the device. And then because we're watching the network flows themselves and looking at other data points around the network, we can get a lot more information that it wouldn't be available with something like a point-in-time scan.
Good deal. Looks like we have one more question come in. How many devices can you cover, and what does scalability look like?
I'll take that one too, if you don't mind. So scalability is actually one of our strong points. I kind of touched on that a bit with the flexibility column. Because a lot of our collection methods are routable, we do deploy like a server collector relationship. So we'll have a centralized server with X number of collectors on the network based on the architecture of the network to gather the information we need. And what we often find is that, and it actually surprises a lot of people, is when we do these deployments or do the engineering behind them and walk through with the customer, there's often surprise at the low number of collectors we deploy. We don't leverage spans very often. It's not very realistic. We do take them where they're valuable, but we don't exclusively rely on spans, which allows us to greatly scale better. And our current deployments, we have deployments as small as 1,000 endpoints, all the way up to over 1.6 million from a single server. So it scales very, very well.
All right. You know what? That's all the time that we have for questions today. So let me take a second and announce our big winner for our Google Home. It's Robert Wild. So congrats, Robert. We'll be in touch and get you that Google Home. And for everyone else, thank you for listening to today's presentation. We hope you found it valuable. And if you do have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Feel free to email us at info@greatbaysoftware.com. And thank you, and have a great rest of your day.